Okay. Well, first, thank you for organizing this wonderful event. My name is S.J. Lee or SeungJoo Lee. I'm the founder and CEO of Orum Therapeutics, which is a biotech company making antibody drugs for cancer. And today I'll be the moderator of this panel. And the topic of the panel is biotech in 10 years. And before we start, I'd like to ask our panelists to briefly introduce themselves and a little bit about the company that you're leading or working at.
My name is James Jungkue Lee, father of two sons and husband of one wife, fortunately. And I was a scientist by training, but quickly moved to business side back in 1997 and spent roughly almost 20 years as a BD person. And BridgeBio was founded 2015 September as my third biotech company, where I joined founder or co-founder. If I look back, first company, Crystal Genomics, which is now on Kostak, is quite good success to me. I thought that that company was made by myself, but it was kind of a big mistake. So due to that belief, I started a second biotech company. It turned out to be a total failure. So from that experience, I learned a lot. And I started BridgeBio, as mentioned, 2015, with more disciplined caution. So 4 years has passed, and during that time, I could license out a compound, the Boehringer Ingelheim, several months ago at 1.1 billion Biobox deal package. So we are on IPO process, hoping to go public December 20. So that's it.
My name is Ryan. I'm a principal and a senior manager at Mirae Capital. Mirae Capital is a private equity investment arm of Mirae Financial Group. My educational background is molecular biology and genetics. I was a research scientist in a local pharma and also multinational pharma. Spent several years there and joined the investment side of business 3 years ago. It's really nice to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
I'm Matt Evans, co-founder of Ileo Science. Ileo Science was founded by a Korean scientist who's a pharmaceutical scientist at the University of Utah, Dr. Bae Yoo-han. I'm a lawyer by training, and this is my first pharmaceutical startup. I'm a serial entrepreneur. Ileo was started just last year. We have a very promising technology that enables oral delivery of approximately 20% of injectable drugs, including peptides and plasmids.
Thank you. So as I mentioned, the topic of this panel is 10 years. So 10 years could be a long time, or it could be a short time for biotech, right? So maybe if you're not in biotech, in the biotech world, 2 years is like it seems like day after tomorrow in a sense, because in biotech, the product development cycle is usually 10 to 15 years. So in the next 10 years, if you have a product in the market, you're really fast in 10 years. But still, I think with the new technology emerging from AI to different automation, I think there would be a lot of technological advances for biotech in the next 10 years. So I'd like to invite James to comment on what you think about what kind of technological advances we should keep an eye on.
Yes, I'll point out two technology. So one is AI. As mentioned, I started my career as a researcher back in 1993 after learning a little bit about the X-ray crystallography. That time, X-ray crystallography is one of the heaviest computing user. So I used the Cray, DEC2, VEC system, but all those combined computing system is much inferior to my cell phone. So increasing computing power will define our society and individuals as well. Recently, I have met roughly 4 AI-based drug discovery companies. So one based in Israel, one based in Toronto, one based in South San Francisco, another based in China. But they're using different technology, but all based in really great computing system. I think it's advancing so fast, and within probably 2 to 3 years, we will see totally different drug discovery process. So I don't know where it'll take us to, but I think AI is really one thing we should pay very close attention.
So just a follow-up question, do you also see advances in clinical development in
Right.
application of AI as well as discovery?
Yeah, that's right. A very hot topic in clinical development combined with AI is synthetic control work cohort, especially in the orphan drug development. The number of patients are very limited, and putting patient on control, so without any advanced medication, is sometimes considered very unethical. So with AI or data science, so now several companies are trying virtual, synthetic or virtual control arm. That's really defining drug discovery and development in a different way.
Did anybody from the panel have any comments about technology?
As an investor, I see a lot of biotechs coming. The technology is based on cell and gene therapy. I think we have seen a lot of advances in this modality, and especially in the CAR T area. I had quite a investment opportunities in CAR T sector. They've been trying like a different approaches, like a switching molecule type of things, allogenic approaches, and they have been able to identify new targets that is not really known in the publication or the conferences. So I have a high expect of this area, and I think the next 10 years we'll see more advances in this type of technology.
Okay. Matt, would you like to comment as well? Or?
One of the developments I expect is that the internationalization of pharmaceutical science will continue to expand, and that, like in Asia, there will be an increasing role for Asian pharmaceutical companies. And I think that the progress that's been made in the last few decades will just increase going forward.
Thank you. I think I think we also need to think about how we develop drugs, and that takes a lot of different stakeholders working together. So for those of you who are not in the biotech sector, the biotech sector is quite complicated in a sense that there's people who invent the technology, which is usually universities, and then there's companies that further develop the technology, and then there's a bigger company that licenses that to take it further into the clinic, and then there may be even a third bigger company to develop it, and then so it takes at least 3 or 4 different institutions to develop one product. And even when it's in the market, people who make decisions on which product is used for the patients is different from so the patient doesn't make the decision, it's the doctors who make the decisions. And it's not the doctors who pay, or it's not the patients who pay for it. So there's a sort of a separation of product decision making, product usage, and product payment. So there's many different stakeholders, and the different dynamics of it is slightly different in different countries. So today, actually, I think we're lucky that we have someone from a Korean entrepreneurial background and someone from a Korean investor background, and we have Matt, who's an entrepreneur in the US, so operating in 3 different sort of ecosystem. So I'd like to ask the panel to comment about what you think about how the ecosystem would evolve in the next 10 years. And I'd like to ask Matt to start first about your views on how the US ecosystem would evolve.
Well, speaking to the ecosystem generally, globalization has been a huge impact that American companies are using companies from across the world to do different parts of the development. One of the things that we're watching closely in the United States is the Medicare. Medicare is the largest drug purchaser in the world, and the pharmaceutical industry successfully lobbied the U.S. Congress originally to prevent the Medicare buyers from negotiating prices with drug companies. That provision is politically unpopular in the United States. Approximately 80% of Republican voters oppose that restriction and 90% of Democrats. And before he was elected president, Donald Trump also opposed the restriction on Medicare negotiation of drug prices. 3 different bills have been proposed in the current Congress, all that would empower Medicare to negotiate and use their market power to push prices down. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that starting in 2023, the American taxpayers would save approximately $50 billion per year over the next 7 years. And the majority of that $50 billion would come in the form of reduced revenues to drug companies. So it's something that the drug industry is very concerned about in the United States, and it's a public policy issue that could impact pharmaceutical investment and enthusiasm for the industry. The CBO's own assessment, they estimate that 3 to 5% of drugs would not make it to commercialization, that there would be approximately 8 to 15 drugs between 2003 and the end of the decade that would not be developed if the U.S. were to pass these provisions. So something that we're interested in and watching closely to see how that impacts the global pharmaceutical market.
Matt, just as a follow-up question, as you mentioned, the U.S. is the biggest purchaser of drugs, and actually in most marketing reports, the U.S. market is almost half of the world market. So any policy change in drug price will be impact biotechs and entrepreneurs all over the world. So do you have any thoughts on how we, as a community, sort of prepare for that new world if these regulation passes?
So the fact that the United States purchases approximately half of the drugs in the world makes them aware of the fact that they're subsidizing drug discovery and research and development because other advanced economies, those governments negotiate with drugs and have formularies where they'll cut out different drugs if they can't get a good price. I think that pharmaceutical companies just need to be aware of it. I don't believe that there will be retraction. I think it'll just be diminished growth, even if those pass, and it will just be my main issue is just investor enthusiasm for the market, and if it'll be a little bit harder to raise money. Good news for us is that even the current proposals that are now at the U.S. House of Representatives, the target dates for launching are approximately 2023.
So talking about investors, I'd like to invite Ryan to also comment about your view on the Korean biotech ecosystem now and
now and the future.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any problems you see now?
Personally, I think much of the Korea biotech boom in this ecosystem much owed to the abundant funding from the Korean government and partnering efforts and much success from our local pharma like Hanmi, Dongha, and Yuhan. And since 2015, I think we have been able to show the world what Korean ecosystem can do, and we could nurture any a good innovative assets and develop that drug into a global market competent drug and therapeutics. But I still think that we kind of lack the sustainability in this ecosystem. I see a boom and I see many talents coming into this sector, but I sometimes ask myself, what if the Korean government stopped funding this private sector, and what if there is not much of an innovative ideas left in the academia, and what if we experience a shortage of talents in this sector?
Thanks for sharing that. So in lieu of what you said and what Matt commented about U.S. drug pricing going down, how should we as a community respond to the risk of U.S. drug price going down? And if the government stops pumping money into the ecosystem, how do we move forward?
I think about two things. As an investor, I see sudden shortage of talents coming into this sector, especially the young talents. So when I look at the global leading ecosystem like Cambridge in the United States, I see many young talents joining the industrial leading companies like a multinational pharma, train there and found their own companies or join any biotechs in their side. And but I rarely see that kind of things in Korea. I rarely see any young scientists who were trained in the industry leading companies joining the biotech. When I interview them, actually they say they still think like joining biotech is kind of a risk to them. And I see many seniors on the other hand. So I think somehow we need to attract more like young and bright minds into this sector in order to drive the growth of this ecosystem. And the other thing is like I receive many comments from foreign investors or tech scout of the multinational pharmas saying that the pipeline of Korean biotech is somewhat Me Too type of things. They want to see more first-in-class type of approach and de novo type of approach from the Korean biotech. And I think in order to do that, I think we need to interact more with the global players, learn more about the global market, US market of course, and figure out what they are looking for, what kind of technology are there, what the kind of technology could enter the market, and what kind of drug profile will be competent in their market. And that's how I think we can figure out how to drive the growth of this ecosystem and have a sustainability for the next 10 years.
So to summarize what you said, it's really about innovation, having more innovative drugs in, being developed from Korea. So I'd like to invite James. So you have been actually looking for innovation all over the world, and you've successfully sourced innovation from my hometown Daejeon, and you've developed it and licensed out to a German-based global pharmaceutical company. So I'm curious what you think about the current ecosystem from a perspective of not just Korea, but maybe regional, even global, how this ecosystem is and how we can move forward.
Yes, I have to correct one thing. I think I know many of the part of the globe in terms of the biotech or biotech innovation or investor, but only one country I have no idea is North Korea. So yeah. As mentioned, I started my career back in 1993 and have observed really steady and robust improvement in terms of the science, investment, and talent inflow, and also globalization in Korea. So I think we should be very proud of our country because Korea is the only country which has invented molecules licensed to pharma company very steadily. So although if we compare our country with US or Boston or San Francisco, everything is behind them. But if we look ourselves on a serial perspective, then we have made a really good progress. And another thing is that as a CEO of an individual company, my view is really focused on how to survive or how to make the company survive. So key is to figure out what's the challenge and what will be the response or option available to us. So small biotech company with a limited domestic market and also very limited capital. The BridgeBio has focused on not only CAR-T, fancy CAR-T, but on small molecule because it's much cheaper to develop, and that works quite well. So we will always have very difficult challenges in front of us. China might be challenged, but at the same time, China might be real big kind of benefit for us. So I think we should look outside sometimes as a challenge, but also at the same time as a opportunity. So responding to them in a very speedy way is the key.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. We have about a few minutes left. So I'd like to ask each panelist to think about, so since we have, Korea and US representatives on the panel, think about ways we can work internationally to get new drugs to patients. And I'd like to ask Matt if you have any comments on how we can work together internationally.
Speaking as a serial entrepreneur who's spent most of my career in the healthcare IT space, in healthcare tech, I've been stunned by how global pharmaceuticals are already. The CROs are everywhere, and if I go to a big conference, there are booths from every country in the world. And then when I'm on phone calls with different global pharmas, it astounds me every single time the internationalization of the scientists that are on the call. You hear people from India and from Korea and from Japan and from Germany and Russia, all on these conference calls. It's if there's a melting pot industry in the world, I think that pharmaceutical science and the pharmaceutics industry represents the internationalization of the global world and the way that the scientific community is looking for excellence wherever it can find it. And there are CROs in all parts of the world that do development work for us. And so I don't have any prognosis about the future, except to say that the state of globalization is already extraordinary.
Right. It's already here. Yeah. Ryan?
Yes. For the internalization.
So maybe you can comment on, your company also invests in US-based VCs. So maybe you can comment on that around that line.
So all the valuation of the companies and technologies pretty much depends on their local market. And our company's strategy is to become a syndicate or the follow-up investors to the leading local investors in that particular biotech. And it's because we are still learning the market and we are not really ready to lead the deal in the foreign countries. So I think that could be also applied to the Korean biotech. And as we are, I think all the boom has started since 2015. So we are still in a beginning stage of making this ecosystem globally, making into a global level ecosystem. So I think Korean biotechs needs to interact more with the foreign investors, multinational pharma, since they have a lot of collaborative programs like incubator type of things, and they even have CVCs. And so I think the Korean biotechs, all the players in this ecosystem needs to interact with the global players, and so to educate ourselves and become global competent companies.
James, please.
Yes. So when you say globalization, I think there is a two direction. One is inbound globalization. Another one is outbound globalization. When you say globalization, I guess most of people think it's outbound globalization. But the easiest way to be global will be bring global community at our hometown. So this type of event is also very good example of getting together at our hometown. And also another thing is that China is a really big magnet very close to us. So again, back in 1997, only way to meet an executive at the global pharma company is go out to their home. But nowadays, because of China, we can meet lots of people, C-level people, not in Seoul, but at least in Shanghai. So inbound globalization to Korea or to China is a real big implication to us.
Well, thank you. I'd like to thank the panelists for a very informative and dense discussion, and the audience for paying attention. So thank you, everybody.